Welcome to Landscape Photo Editing Sessions. I'm Raiatea Arkiri. In this episode, I'm going to take you through the process of one of my Seascape photos. So whenever I'm shooting photos and processing photos, I actually try to get the feeling and the mood of the photo when I took the picture. So for this one, the waves were pretty rough and I was actually barefoot and it was pretty intense. So I'm going to try to give this a dramatic mood, and it was also pretty rainy, pouring rain. Alright, so I'm going to get started, jump right into it. So I'm going to fix the exposure a little bit, it's underexposed. And then I'm going to decrease the highlights a little bit. And then I want to boost up the foreground. It's pretty dark for me right now. I'm going to boost that up. I also want to increase the whites. And if you see the histogram, there's not much just above. There's not much white, so I don't really have to worry about clipping. So I'm just going to increase it a bit. And also the blacks, I want to really boost up the foreground. I don't really want any clipping in the blacks. So yeah. And the clarity, I'm going to increase that. And then next thing I'm going to fix the white balance. Or not fix it, but change the temperature to something I want. So the technique I use is just to increase the vibrance and saturation to 100, and then adjust. It'll make it easier to adjust the temperature and see exactly what these sliders are doing to your photo. So I'm just going to make it a lot warmer and also a bit more magenta. I'm going to reset the saturation, then bring down the vibrance to around 41, I guess. And I'm not going to bother with the contrast. Alright, so that's it for editing in Lightroom. I'm going to Control-Shift-C this and copy the settings and paste it to the other photo. So I'm going to use this photo, the underexposed one, to blend the sky together with using luminosity mask, and that's going to be real fast. This photo was the easy one actually to blend. So I'm going to right click, select both of those layers, right click, open as layers in Photoshop. Alright, I have the photos open in Photoshop now, and it's in the right order. So first thing I want to do is get rid of that overexposed sky, and I'm going to do that by using luminosity mask. So first I'm going to go to my luminosity mask. You can download the free actions if you want to use luminosity mask, and then generate those masks, and then make a black mask on the underexposed photo by pressing the Alt button and clicking on the layer mask icon. Then I'm going to go down to my channels. So what I'm trying to do is I only want the brightest parts to be blended, so I don't really care about the this part of the sky. I just want just this part over here where the light's shining through. And I also want to keep this wave within this. I like the wave in here in this photo. So I'm going to go to the channels and then find one suitable. So I think Bright 3 is a pretty good choice. And then I'm going to hide the selection by pressing Ctrl H. And then using just a large white brush, I'm just going to paint along the sky. I'm actually going to Ctrl Z that, make the opacity 100%, and then just paint along the sky. Alright, so that did a pretty good job, but I also want to fix some of that, so some of the layer came through. So I'm gonna use make sure to deselect first, and then use a black brush and just zoom in a little bit and just paint along. Large soft brush I'm using. Alright, that should be good. Alright, that's good. Looking good now. So that's it for the blending. Next thing I want to do is, I think the water's pretty bright over here, so I'm gonna use a dodge and burn layer, and I'm gonna create this by Control-Shift-N to create a new layer, and then I'm gonna go to change the blending mode to soft light, and I'm gonna fill it with a 50% gray. So with this technique, you can use a regular black or white brush, and a black brush will darken, and a white brush will lighten. And I think it's a better technique instead of using dodge and burn, because it's non-destructive, so you can just always go back and fix whatever mistakes you can make. So I'm going to Control-Z that, and then see. So I'm going to change the opacity to around 20%, and then just use a black brush. I'm also going to go to my luminosity mask and select the brights one, because I don't want to paint any of this onto the foreground or the rocks. I just want the water to be darkened. So I'm going to select that, brights one, Control H to hide that. And then I'm going to start painting. So I'm just going to darken all this water. I'm going to do it a few times. A little bit over here. Here. I want to darken the edges so that your eye isn't attracted to the edge of the frame. Alright, that's pretty dark now. If you look at that, that's almost black. And you notice how the luminosity mask prevented the foreground from getting darkened. So you can see that. It's a big difference. Alright, the next thing I want to do is give it a little bit more contrast. Except I'm just going to only darken, I'm going to do this by darkening the midtones. So I'm going to create a curve adjustment layer. I'm just going to go to the midtones and then just bring it down a little bit. Invert this mask, and then go to my channels, go to my midtones. I think I'm going to use midtones 2, select it, Control H, I'm going to hide the selection, and then you're going to use a large white brush, and I want to kind of darken the water. Let's see, bring that opacity back up. So I'm going to darken the sky, darken the water, and there. So with the midtones, it didn't affect the darkest part or the lightest part, so the brightest part of the image is still hidden with this curved layer mask, and the darkest parts are also hidden. So that just brought a little bit more contrast and darkened some of the highlights or the midtones. And next thing I want to do is brighten this wave just a little bit, because this is my subject, the wave. So I want that to be a little bit brighter so that I go straight to that wave. So I'm just going to do a slight S-curve. And that should be good. And then invert the mask and then just paint with the large white brush just on the wave. Alright, you can see the difference with that. Just a subtle difference, but it's a good difference. Alright, the next thing I want to do is bring a little bit more contrast within the water over here. It's a bit flat right now, but so I'm just gonna do another S-curve and I'm just gonna increase the brightest part of the water just slightly, ever so slightly, and then go to some of the dark part and then just bring that down. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to invert that mask, go to my channels, and then use the brights one, select that, hide it, hide the selection, and then just use a large white brush to brush in the areas I want to be contrasty. Alright, that's looking good. Alright, next thing I want to do is I really want to make the sky a bit more dramatic. So I'm going to do a big contrast curve or S-curve. So I want to actually brighten some of this part. So I want it to be brighter to have more of a dramatic feel. So I'm going to brighten some of the brightest part a bit. And then I'm going to go to the darkest part of the sky and then just bring it down. But I don't want to bring it down too much because that's a bit much, but just bring it down a little bit. And I still want to have more contrast within the midtones. So I'm just going to go to the midtones and then bring that down a little bit more. Alright, so that made a huge difference in the sky. And I'm just going to use a simple gradient. I'm just going to pull it down from where it starts from the horizon, and just going to bring it down to this rock. And that's a pretty good, not bad. Alright. Next thing I want to do is increase the contrast of the foreground. So I want a little bit more blacks and just a little bit more contrast in the foreground. So I'm going to go to the darkest part, which is here, and then just bring that down slightly. And then bring up a brighter part a little bit. And that'll just add a bit more contrast in the foreground. I'm going to control the mask, and then go to darks 1, select that, hide the mask, and then I'm just going to paint along the foreground with a large white brush. Alright, that's looking good. And then finally I want to change up the colors a bit. So change up the color scheme. I'm going to use this with the curve adjustment. And I'm going to go to my RGB selector and go to the reds. So I'm going to increase the reds highlights So I'm just going to go over here, bring the reds up, and then go to my midtones and just bring it down to the line. Same thing, I want to do this with the greens too. Go to my highlights, bring those up, and this is giving it that cinematic feel. You can get those awkward color schemes, but I think this actually really matches with this photo. And then finally, maybe just a little bit more in the greens. I'm just going to increase that a little bit more. Okay. And then finally go down to the blues, and I'm actually going to reduce the blues in the highlights. So I'm going to find that. There we go. And just reduce that. Go to my midtones and bring that up. Oh yeah. Gotta make sure I deselect that luminosity mask first, but I'm just gonna fill it with white. And now you can see like a huge difference. So you're really getting that kind of purplish and greenish tint within the shadows, and then the water is quite kind of a greenish tint, and then the sky is a bit red and green. So this is giving me that final feel that I want. So I'm actually gonna use a gradient with the sky, and I just want the foreground to be affected for now, and then I'm gonna do about maybe a 50% in the sky. So 50% white in the sky, so that would be 50% gray, and then that'll just give it a little bit less in the sky. So that's all for the editing, but there's a few technical things I want to fix. So if I zoom in here, it's quite noisy in the sky, and also the lens is kind of soft in the edges. So I'm going to show you what I do to fix those. So basically I'm going to make a copy of my just my luminosity mask, just my 2 layers. So Control Shift Alt and E, and that'll make a copy of the visible layers, and I'm going to make 2 copies. So 1 copy for reducing the noise and 1 copy for sharpening the edges. So I'm just going to use Photoshop's default plugin, Reduce Noise. And the default settings will work just fine for the sky. And then I'm just going to be lazy here and just create a mask and just do a gradient along here. And it won't really matter that much. It's still looking good. Or actually I'm going to pull it down just a little bit more, just to get some of that noise out of the wave a little bit more. So you can see that reduced the noise pretty well. Next thing, I want to get rid of this softness over here. So you can see it's pretty sharp over here, but once I get to the edges, it's getting less sharp. So I'm just going to do a unsharp mask, and a radius around 2 works well for the edges. And then I'm going to lower the amount to around 100. And then I just want the edges to be sharpened and not the central frame, because that's already too sharp. So I'm just going to create a new layer, do a kind of oval selection around the edges or in the central part of the frame. I'm going to Control Shift I to invert that, and then I'm just going to fill it with black. And then I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and I'm just going to blur that a lot so I can get a good selection of the edges, or a good transition between the soft and the sharp And then I can control click on the icon and then layer mask that. And now only the edges should be sharpened. So yeah, you can see that. Thanks for watching. If you liked my video, please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends.